you watch them post. The vacation photos, the casual thoughts, the mundane updates about their lunch. And something in you recoils, not from judgment, though that's what you tell yourself, but from something deeper. Something that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, being asked to jump. You've composed 100 posts in your mind, deleted 1,000 before they ever saw light. Your finger hovers over the share button, and the weight that descends isn't just nervousness, it's existential. It's the feeling of being about to step onto a stage where every seat is filled with potential critics, and the performance is simply the ma existing, simply saying, I was here, I thought this, I felt that. And so you don't. You scroll, you observe, you become a ghost in the machine, a presence without evidence, a consciousness without testimony. Your friends wonder if you're even still on the platform. They send you memes privately because they know you won't see them otherwise. You've become the person who exists in direct messages but never in public view. The person who watches life happen but doesn't document that they're living it. Here's what nobody tells you about this silence. It feels like safety, but it functions as erasure. This is the core paradox that defines you. The very thing that protects you. This carefully maintained invisibility, this refusal to be seen, is the same thing that slowly convinces you that you don't deserve to be seen at all. You learn somewhere, sometime, that visibility equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals danger. So you made yourself small, you made yourself quiet, you made yourself a witness instead of a participant, and it worked until it didn't. Because what started as self-protection has metastasized into something else entirely. It's become a pattern of self-negation so deeply embedded that you can no longer distinguish between I choose not to share and I don't deserve to take up space. The boundary between privacy and self-erasure has blurred until they're indistinguishable. You tell yourself you're above the need for validation, that you're simply more authentic than those who perform their lives online. But late at night, when you're alone with your thoughts, you know the truth, you're terrified of being known. This isn't about social media, it never was. This is about the fundamental human terror of being witnessed, of putting yourself forward and being found insufficient. And you've been running from that terror for so long that you've forgotten you're running at all. Let's name what's actually happening here. In psychological terms, what you're experiencing is a sophisticated form of preemptive rejection, the practice of rejecting yourself before anyone else gets the chance. It's a defense mechanism so elegant that it feels like wisdom, so automatic that it masquerades as personality. But it's neither. Think of your psyche as a house with many rooms. In one of those rooms, probably built during childhood or adolescence, you made a devastating calculation. Being seen equals being hurt. Maybe you shared something that was ridiculed. Maybe you expressed excitement and were met with indifference. Maybe you existed loudly and someone made you feel that your volume was a problem. The specifics vary, but the conclusion was universal. Visibility is dangerous. So you installed what psychologists call hypervigilant self-monitoring. A constant, exhausting internal surveillance system that scans everything you might say or share for potential points of attack. This is your amygdala working overtime, treating social exposure the same way it would treat a physical threat. Before you can even finish formulating a thought to share, your threat detection system has already run it through 1,000 scenarios of judgment, misunderstanding, and ridicule. You've essentially trained yourself in anticipatory shame, the ability to feel embarrassment for things that haven't happened yet, for judgments that haven't been made, for rejections that exist only in your imagination. This is why composing a simple social media post can take hours. You're not actually writing a post, you're trying to construct something so perfectly innocuous, so carefully neutral, that it cannot possibly be used against you. But here's the neurological trap. The more you avoid the thing you fear, the more your brain confirms that it's dangerous. This is the principle of negative reinforcement. Every time you don't post and nothing bad happens, your nervous system files that away as evidence that posting would have led to catastrophe. You're literally training your brain to fear visibility by consistently avoiding it. The mechanism operates like this. Your default mode network, the part of your brain that activates when you're thinking about yourself and how others perceive you, becomes hyperactive. It generates endless simulations of social disaster. You imagine someone screenshotting your post to mock it. You imagine people talking about how you're trying too hard, or not trying enough, or being fake, or being too real. Your brain becomes a theater playing infinite versions of your social death. And the only way to quiet that theatre? Don't give it material to work with. Don't post, don't share, don't exist publicly. This is what psychologists call experiential avoidance, the attempt to avoid internal discomfort by avoiding external situations. But here's the cruel irony: the more you avoid, the more sensitive you become. Your tolerance for the discomfort of visibility atrophies like an unused muscle. What might have been manageable fear becomes paralyzing terror. What might have been mild self-consciousness becomes incapacitating shame. You've accidentally conditioned yourself into a prison that feels like freedom. Let me tell you what this really costs you. Not in followers or likes, who gives a damn about that. The real cost is far more profound and far more devastating. You're paying the price of invisible grief, the sorrow of the life, half-lived, half-shared, half-acknowledged. You experience beautiful moments, profound thoughts, genuine joys, and then you immediately begin the process of minimizing them. It's not that interesting, you tell yourself. Nobody cares, you whisper. It would seem like I'm bragging, you conclude. And so those moments die in the privacy of your mind, never validated, never witnessed, never allowed to exist beyond the confines of your internal experience. This is what the philosopher Martin Buber called the failure to enter into I-Fi relationships, the inability to let yourself be fully known and to fully know others in return. Instead, you exist in perpetual I-S relationships, where you're an observer of others' lives while your own remains hidden. You know intimate details about people you barely speak to because you've been watching them for years. But they don't know you. They can't. You won't let them. The weight of this is carried in your body. It's the tightness in your chest when someone asks, "Are you on social media?" And you have to explain, again, why you're not really active. It's the isolation of experiencing something shareable, a beautiful sunset, a funny moment, a painful realization, and having nowhere to put it. It's the slow, corrosive belief that your internal life doesn't matter enough to externalize. You're sacrificing authentic connection for the illusion of safety. Because real connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires visibility. And visibility is exactly what you've taught yourself to avoid at all costs. So you settle for surface-level relationships where people know your name and your face, but not your thoughts, not your struggles, not the texture of your inner world. Here's the philosophical weight of this. You're essentially agreeing to exist as a non-person in the digital public square. And increasingly, that digital public square is where culture happens, where movements begin, where communities form, where ideas spread. By refusing to participate, you're not just protecting yourself, you're absenting yourself. You're agreeing that your voice doesn't matter, your perspective doesn't count, your existence doesn't warrant documentation. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you become who you truly are if you're constantly erasing evidence of who you are? How can you integrate your identity if you're fragmenting it into public self and private self, and the public self is essentially an empty vessel? This is the invisible grief, the knowledge that you're capable of expression, of creation, of contribution, and you're choosing silence instead. Not the powerful silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the fearful silence of someone who has everything to say and is too terrified to say it. You're not protecting yourself anymore. You're disappearing yourself. And every day you practice this disappearance, it becomes more difficult to remember that you ever wanted to be seen at all. Let's talk about how this plays out in your actual life. Because this isn't just about social media, it never was. This is a pattern of self-erasure that infiltrates everything you do. You might be someone who keeps their accomplishments secret. You get the promotion, the award, the acceptance letter, and your first instinct isn't to celebrate but to hide it. You're terrified of seeming like you're bragging, so you go to the opposite extreme. You make yourself invisible even in your victories. People don't know about your successes until months or years later, if at all. You've trained yourself to believe that taking pride in your achievements is a character flaw. You might struggle with an excruciating ambivalence about documentation. You're on vacation, experiencing something beautiful, and part of you wants to capture it, to share it, to say, "I was here, this mattered to me." But that impulse is immediately attacked by another part that says, "That's narcissistic, that's performative, that's inauthentic." So you take the photo but never share it, or you don't take the photo at all, trying to be present, but then the memory fades and you wish you had something to hold on to. You might have relationships where people don't really know you. You've been friends with someone for years, but they don't know your opinions on important things. They don't know what you're struggling with. They don't know what you dream about. Not because you're private by nature, but because you've learned that expressing yourself is dangerous. So you become a mirror, reflecting others back to themselves, never offering your own substance. You might experience intense resentment toward people who share freely. You watch someone post about their mundane day and feel a mixture of contempt and envy. Part of you judges them for being so self-centered, so attention-seeking. But another part of you, the part you don't want to acknowledge, is desperately envious of their freedom. They can just exist publicly. They can share a thought without spiraling into existential crisis. They have access to something you've locked yourself out of, the simple human pleasure of being known. You might have a fraught relationship with your own visibility in any context. Job interviews terrify you because they require self-promotion. Dating apps feel impossible because you have to present yourself. Even answering, "What have you been up to?" becomes a minefield. You've developed such a sophisticated habit of self-minimization that you literally don't know how to talk about yourself without apologizing for it. You might be someone who has thoughts, opinions, and creative impulses that never see light. You write things you never publish. You have ideas you never share. You create things you never show anyone. Your internal world is rich and complex, but your external world is a carefully curated blank slate. You're prolific in private and silent in public. And over time, this discrepancy becomes its own kind of pain. The pain of having something to offer and choosing not to offer it. You might police yourself in ways you'd never police others. You'd never tell a friend that their joy wasn't worth sharing, that their accomplishment wasn't worth celebrating, that their pain wasn't worth expressing. But you tell yourself these things constantly. You hold yourself to standards of invisibility that you'd find cruel if applied to anyone else. You've internalized a voice that says you're too much or you're not enough, often both simultaneously. Here's what you need to understand. These are coping strategies, not personality traits. You weren't born believing that visibility equals danger. You learned it, and what was learned can be unlearned. But unlearning requires something incredibly difficult. It requires you to stop gaslighting yourself about what you actually want. Because underneath all the rationalizations about privacy and authenticity, there's a simpler truth. You want to be seen. You want to be known. You want your existence to be acknowledged, your thoughts to be heard, your experiences to be witnessed. These aren't shameful desires, they're human ones. The work of healing begins with the work of witnessing your own pattern. Not judging it, not trying to immediately fix it, just seeing it clearly. Recognizing that every time you hover over the share button and decide not to press it, you're not making a neutral choice. You're reinforcing a belief that you don't deserve to take up space. So how do you start to heal this? How do you begin to reclaim your right to exist publicly, to be witnessed, to take up space without apology? It starts with understanding that healing isn't about forcing yourself to post. It's not about suddenly becoming someone who shares every thought and feeling. That would just be another form of self-violence, another way of betraying your own needs. Instead, healing is about expanding your window of tolerance for visibility. It's about practicing what psychologists call graded exposure, small, manageable steps toward the thing you fear. Maybe it's posting something once a month. Maybe it's sharing something in a story that disappears in 24 hours. Maybe it's just commenting on someone else's post instead of silently liking it. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that you're gently, gradually teaching your nervous system that visibility doesn't equal annihilation. This requires a practice that might sound strange. Inner child reparenting. You need to go back to that moment when you first learned that being seen was dangerous, and you need to speak to that younger version of yourself with compassion. You need to say, you learned to be quiet because someone made you feel that your voice was a problem. But they were wrong. Your voice matters. Your existence matters. You deserve to be witnessed. You need to engage in what Jung called shadow work, the practice of integrating the parts of yourself you've disowned. In this case, the shadow is your desire for visibility, for validation, for connection. You've shamed that desire, called it narcissistic, called it needy. But it's neither. It's human. And until you reclaim it, until you acknowledge that yes, you want to be seen and that's okay, you'll remain fragmented. The practice of healing also involves choosing softness over hardness. You've been so hard on yourself, so critical, so demanding of perfection before you'll allow yourself to be visible. What if you chose differently? What if you posted something imperfect? What if you shared a thought that wasn't fully formed? What if you allowed yourself to be human in public? Here's what's on the other side of that risk. Not universal adoration, not viral fame, not even necessarily more followers. What's on the other side is something far more valuable: integration. The ability to exist as one coherent self instead of a fragmented collection of public and private personas. The freedom to express yourself without running it through a gauntlet of imaginary judgment. The relief of not carrying every thought, every experience, every joy and sorrow in the isolation of your own mind. James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." You've been avoiding facing this fear of visibility for years, maybe decades. And in that avoidance, it's grown stronger, more entrenched, more convincing. It's time to face it, not with violence, not with force, but with curiosity, with compassion, with the understanding that you learned to hide for good reasons, and now you're learning that you can emerge for even better ones. The goal of this work isn't to become someone who performs their life online. The goal isn't to suddenly start posting every thought and meal and moment. The goal is simply this: to reclaim your right to exist publicly without shame. To share something and not spend 3 hours analyzing whether it was the right thing to share, to post a photo and not immediately regret it, to express an opinion and not brace for attack. To exist as yourself, complicated, imperfect, evolving, and trust that you can survive being witnessed. Because here's the truth that nobody tells you: the people who matter won't judge you, and the people who judge you don't matter. The imaginary audience you've constructed in your mind, the one that tears apart everything you say, is far more brutal than any real audience you'll ever encounter. Most people are too busy worrying about their own visibility to scrutinize yours. You're not broken, you're not antisocial, you're not above the need for connection. You're someone who learned, through painful experience, that visibility comes with risk. And you're right, it does. But what you've forgotten is that invisibility comes with a cost too. And increasingly, that cost is higher than the risk. You deserve to be seen. Not in spite of your imperfections, but including them. Not after you've perfected yourself, but exactly as you are right now. Your thoughts matter, your experiences matter, your existence matters. The work of becoming whole isn't about fixing yourself, it's about integrating yourself. It's about bringing all the parts of you that you've scattered and hidden into one coherent, visible, unapologetic self. You've been quiet long enough. The world is ready to hear you. The question is, are you ready to let yourself be heard? If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you found yourself in these words, know that you're not alone. There are thousands of us learning to exist out loud, one terrifying, liberating post at a time. The silence protected you once. But now it's time to find out what your voice can do.